Because from this point on, we're looking at contemporary religions. And so for those of you who are in the medical fields, these are people you're going to deal with, right? I mean, there's a large Hindu community here in Western New York. There's actually a temple in Williamsville. There's apparently another Hindu temple in East Amherst. So. But before we get to the challenges of death and how to cope with the experiences of death, just some background about the Hindu religion. It's possibly the oldest religion, period, that we know of. And certainly it's the oldest religion that's still being practiced today. Now, one of the, and some of you touched upon it in your questions, one of the difficulties Westerners have with Hinduism is that it's not like a religion that you're accustomed to. If you're from a Christian, Islamic, or Jewish background, for a Christian, what makes a Christian a Christian? You believe in Christ. Like for some Christian churches, you have to say specifically, I accept Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. Boom. What makes a Muslim a Muslim? Yeah, right? I mean, if you reject that confession, you're not a Muslim, right? For Hinduism, you can be a Hindu, you can believe in 300 million gods, you can believe in one God, you can believe there is no God. I mean, we can believe in one God that no one else believes in. You can add gods to that pantheon, so it's a little more complicated. And by and large, by the religion of Hinduism, we mean a variety of religions and cultures that grow up together around the Indus Valley. They do share some common threads, and these threads will come together as we move along the history of Hinduism. The first period of Hinduism is known as the Vedic period. So by the way, what makes a Hindu a Hindu? This is a good question to ask, it's not clear. Minimum would be accepting the Vedas as revelation. Right? And so we get to Buddhism, and Buddhism comes from Hinduism. The first thing Buddhists do is they reject the Vedas. When we talk about this Vedic period, and we'll come back to these in very, very important terms. The Atman, Moksha, and Samsara. They're there, but they're not emphasized. They will become a key theme in modern or axial / modern Hinduism. And just to reiterate again, so you can believe in one God, 3 million plus gods. In Hinduism, you can be monotheistic or polytheistic. For those of you that have taken religion and social responsibility, or you studied Gandhi, you'll know that Gandhi, who was a devout Hindu, he always speaks about God, God's God. He clearly has a monotheistic slant in his theology. Hinduism in general tends to be very, very inclusive, right? So for those of you familiar with Mother Teresa, it's interesting today, like there are Hindus that, worship Mother Teresa, or they just add, gods like Jesus Christ to their own pantheon of God. It's not that big of a deal. Why? Because for some Hindus, other gods are a manifestation of this one underlining reality, this one Brahmanatman. And we'll get to that a little more. Also in terms of Hinduism, it is not a missionary religion, right? So how many of you have ever had someone knock on your door, talk to you about Jesus Christ? Guys, or Jehovah's Witnesses? No, for Christianity, Christians are probably like the most missionary of all the religions. Maybe second would be Buddhists or Muslims. But in terms of Hinduism, that's not a part of that tradition. And so most Hindus are where? India. So we have about 900 million Hindus today. The vast majority are in India. About 2 million Hindus are in the U.S. today. And which is important, and we'll come back to this, about 1.2 million of those 2 million are directly from India, right? So they're coming to this country and they're dying. They're dying with this traditional understanding of Hinduism in mind. So let's begin with a quick history of the religion of Hinduism. So in the religion of Hinduism, we begin with the Vedic age, which is the first part of this history. By the way, we haven't entered the axial period yet. In the earliest Vedas, particularly something called the Rig Veda, we have this fire sacrifice. This is the central sacrifice of their religion. And it is very much a fruitive religion. And by fruitive, we mean by doing this sacrifice, you actually help the gods. And the gods, in turn, blessed or helped you, right? So you'd want to make sure that you're doing this sacrifice very correctly. Go through the rigors of it, so that you have wealth, long life, and so that you're being protected from natural disasters, etc. Agni is known as the fire god, and he would transform the offerings to the other god. In contemporary Hinduism, Agni falls out. He's not stressed, although he's still there. The devas is a term that you might see, and that just means gods. So prior to this axial period, we get to these new Vedas called the Upanishads, the soul's existence was dependent upon the nourishment from the sacrifice. So the sacrifice, the fire sacrifice, had a cosmic effect. That would include the preservation of the soul. Now, some of those customs will come back to us when we look at contemporary funerary traditions in Hinduism. So in Hinduism, what is the ideal way to dispose of a body?
Cremate.
Cremation, absolutely. And part of that goes back to this period. What is also interesting is during this period, we have the creation that you might be familiar with of the 4 castes. The Brahmin. And even today, even though these castes were abolished, legally in 1947, they still very much function in India. I mean, if you ever get a chance, if you have any friends from India, ask them what their caste is. I guarantee they know what it is. If you go to India, you'll see the stratification of their society based on these castes. So generally speaking, the people who have the most wealth in that country in India, who are Hindu, would be in these classes, or these castes, versus the Shudras. And then outside the Shudras, there's something called the outcasts, or the untouchables, which are literally people who are in the caste system that you can't touch. We'll get to that. So the Brahmins, so in terms of the fire sacrifice in traditional Hinduism, they conducted the fire ritual. The warrior class ruled the people and protected them. The Vaishyavas, or the merchant class, these were the commercials, the businessmen. They made the world go round. And then finally the Shudras, the landless laborers. They did all the hard labor. One of the earliest accounts that we have of this caste system, and today, I mean, this class system is very much still controversial, but you do have figures like Gandhi. Gandhi would say that the caste system is cosmic. Now, to mess with this caste system, so Gandhi, who fought for equal human rights, who would say things like, it is not only immoral, but improper for someone from an upper class to have dinner with someone from a lower class, or to intermarry. To do this, you're messing with the cosmos, because you've been created for a specific purpose, and you should live that vocation to the best of your ability. If you're a Brahmin, you should be a Brahmin to the best of your abilities. So that's what you're created for. And part of this comes out from the Rig Veda, this sacrifice of this cosmic man. And Brahmins, of course, the highest caste, the priestly caste, represent the mouth of this man. And the warrior came from the man's arms. The thighs, the warriors. The warriors, came from body as well. And then finally, the feet would be the servants, the Shudras, the laborers. So what just for you to know, in the Rig Vedas, we have clearly a fruited religion. We don't have a clear conception of what we come today to know as moksha, reincarnation, samsara, but we do have some notion of a cyclical existence of life, going to death, and so on and so forth. And we also have, which would be very, very important today, this idea of cremation as the ideal way to dispose of a body. But something happens. We enter into the axial age, and we begin to have these new religious texts called the Upanishads. There are many of them. And in the Upanishads, now we have this dominant tradition of reincarnation and immortality. All right. So, again, Vedas, we have the ritual period, and many of these rituals still are there today, especially when we look at the funerals, and we look at how Hindus today believe in the afterlife, and how that's relevant for you caring for a Hindu. But in the Upanishads, we have the philosophical beginning, and then we also have, after the Upanishads, we have a third period known as this devotional period. Most Hindus today, there are many Hindus, actually most Hindus today, they take from both periods, but most Hindus today participate in this devotional Hinduism. And we'll talk a little more about that. Yeah?
Are axial age and Upanishad, is that used interchangeably?
So axial age, so remember maybe a week ago, I introduced this axial period. And what made it the axial period was people from around the world, irrespective of each other, started asking these big questions about meaning and existence. Hinduism comes within this period. But what's unique for Hinduism is this Brahman-Atman idea that we find in the Upanishads.
Within the Hinduism period, within the Hinduism religion,
Yeah.
Upanishads correlated to axial period?
Absolutely.
Okay, and
Absolutely.
then what did you say was the third stage after Vedas, Upanishads, and the third one?
The devotional stage,
Okay, thank you.
primarily from this Gita. So what did you guys think of the Gita? Did you like it? Mary, did you like it?
Yeah, it was interesting.
What was,
I like how
yeah.
it was organized too.
Yeah. What was Krishna's main point? Did you catch that? Taylor, did you catch Krishna's main point? Why is Arjuna mad?
Because he doesn't want to fight.
It's like catch-22. Like he's a warrior, and he's going to war against whom? His family, right? So he knows, as a good Hindu, you don't kill your own family. But he's a warrior. He's a part of the warrior class. He has a duty. And Krishna says what to him? It's your duty. But to kill and do what? Kill without. Yes, but
Kill without bias. He told him that you're being biased and selfish by you shouldn't have. I mean, you're a warrior. It's your duty to fight and not be partial to who's on the other side.
very good. So it's your duty. Do your duty, without desiring. Without desires. Do your duty. Is your duty to fight? Do your duty to fight, but do it without desiring. Do it without desiring the death of your family, etc. Which I think many of you said, I don't get how do you act without desires? But that whole idea of acting without desires, that comes here during this axial period, particularly in these holy texts called the Upanishads, which are also part of the Vedas. Just for us, just be aware of this particular god. He's going to come back. He's a Vedic god. He's a very early god. One of the earliest gods we know of. His name is Yama. And you'll see him depicted over and over again. Pay attention to him because we'll see him, especially when we get to Tibetan Buddhism. We'll see Yama again. He's a real good-looking guy, right? Can you see that? He's kind of like a black demon. He's a judge, dispatches souls to heaven or hell. And by the way, you might see this on your test. So, in Hinduism, after the Upanishads, the stress is on reincarnation. Okay? But there's still a heaven and hell. You can be reincarnated. So the goal, let's say, for a Western-er, a Judeo-Christian, is to enter into heaven, not hell, right? Maybe you do want to enter hell. Probably most don't. In Hinduism, you have that same schema, but the stress is on reincarnation. And that's very, very important, especially for this class, when we look at how they deal with death and how they talk about suffering, euthanasia, end-of-life treatment. So, in this particular tradition, he carries the dead off. He's also thought, in some traditions, as the father, the first mortal man who dies, and in his death, he continues to be this link between, the world, between us. He's kind of like the Grim Reaper. Think of the Yama as the Grim Reaper for Hindus. And he also makes us aware that we're vulnerable and that life continues on. In some of the traditions, he's known as the Lord of Hell, so he also punishes souls, but he can also lead the soul to heaven as well. So now we get to kind of the meat of this religion. So when we talk about Hinduism, the first thing we need to talk about is this idea of samsara. What is samsara? Michael, did you catch that in the reading? What's samsara? Does that help?
Cycle of death, life, and rebirth.
The cycle of death and life. This is a traditional image of samsara. This is the wheel of fire, representing your one life passing into another. And who's this in the middle? Anyone know?
Krishna?
Shiva, another very, very important god. And Shiva is dancing this cycle of life and death, continual life and death. So the goal for a Hindu is to break this cycle of samsara. We'll get into each of these terms in a moment. And that brings us to Atman. So the Upanishads. So what makes the Upanishads? The reason why Hinduism is an actual religion is because of ideas like this. The Atman is your inner self, who you are. Not your soul per se. So Caitlin, it's not you have many thoughts going on right now. There's the Caitlin that was born in what year? 1994. Born in 1994, right? That'll live 100 years or more, right? You'll have a great family and whatever else, and be very, very accomplished. That is not your Atman, right? In some ways, that's an illusion. Caitlin, in you is this inner self, this eternal self, which is your Atman. When we talk about what's reincarnated, this Atman, this inner self that each of us have, is reincarnated. And it does take with us some of our personalities in the next life. What Hinduism teaches in this tradition, think of this right here. Ultimately, however, all this is fake. Your personality, all that you do, all that you say, all that you experience, this is an illusion. What matters is that you recognize your true self is a part of everything, that we're all connected, that underneath this entire reality is this Brahman. And Brahman means this just this eternal underlining reality that we are a part of. And the way in which we are a part of it is at our Atman. So there is this saying that neti neti. Neti neti means, so where's truth? Neti neti is not here. All this is an illusion. I am an illusion, right? All our accomplishments are illusionary. Why? Because when you die, you are reincarnated, right? And depending upon how you live, you could be reincarnated as a bug, or you could be reincarnated as, a great holy man or a great holy woman. Anya, you don't look too happy about this.
I'm done talking.
You're done. So realization, so liberation from this cycle of samsara. This is the key. So how do we get out of the cycle of reincarnation? And by the way, so again, the cycle of reincarnation is not a good thing. We tend to think in the West, we'd like to we like to be eclectic and pick from other religions, and we like reincarnation. Maybe many of us like reincarnation, not all of us. But for a Hindu, reincarnation is not good at all. You do not want to be reincarnated. The goal, Say again?
You didn't live well. You had too many desires in life that were self-seeking.
Absolutely. And so the goal is not to be reincarnated and realize that you are a part of this true self. And so that if you get to this realization that you are a part of this ultimate reality, when you die, you become immersed in Brahman. You as your personality no longer exists. You as Elizabeth, all your thoughts, ideas no longer exist. You become part of this underlying reality. Kind of make sense a little bit? Yes, Mary.
I feel like your life then kind of wouldn't matter, and like that you're not like striving. I mean, you can strive towards something, but if you are reincarnated, like your personality is gone anyway. Like you kind of don't exist anymore. Kind of like if I was reincarnated now, technically, I would have had a past life, but I don't remember it. So why would it even matter?
So that's not an uncommon reaction. I should mention though that this is primarily the Upanishad tradition. There's the devotional tradition, which is a tweak on this. But that is a valid criticism of this point. Of course, someone from this tradition would say, Mary, that's the whole point. None of this matters, right? And the sooner you get to that realization, the better off you're going to be.
But it does matter because you're trying to get out of the cycle.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
it matters.
now this brings us to karma. So let's complicate things. So now, how you are born, how you live, the person you are today is a result of multiple lives, right? Every action you do, every action you make, every thought that you have has a positive or negative effect. Okay, and this effect is karma, and karma fuels the cycle of samsara, right? So for those of you that are born well, maybe if you're a Hindu Brahmin, you did something good in your last life, right? If you have more control over your thoughts, over your ideas, it's easier for you to meditate. Chances are you did something well in your last life, right? That's because of your good karma. Nevertheless, the goal in this tradition is not simply to act well or to have good karma, right? And certainly acting well creates good karma. So in other words, if you're a bastard, you are a horrible person, and you treat people poorly, when you die, chances are you will be reincarnated in a lower form of life. You might be a bug, you might be a tree, you might be a demon, you might be something horrible, a ghost, right? Nothing fun. No, not a good life at all. If you live really, really well, you might be reincarnated as a god, a goddess. Maybe you have another chance at this in your human life. That's a possibility as well. But the goal for a Hindu is not a good reincarnation. The goal for a Hindu is not to accumulate karma at all. And we'll talk about how you do that. Yeah.
I thought about this when I was reading it, about life constantly, next life. So let's say you become a tree. There's as a tree, like, there's nothing.
Wouldn't you be freed?
You're like a bug. You'll always be a bug, no? How do you go up from a bug? Or how do you go up to every other bug. Like, it has human.
Well, that's the thing. So you're going to lose consciousness, right? And so in this tradition, it's not entirely clear how that consciousness is passed down. In Buddhism too, especially when you're in your lower form. But certainly in Buddhism, and I think many Hindus would agree, actually I think Buddhists get this from Hindus, that the only way to be liberated, is to be a human. So in some ways, this is the most important life. Even gods and goddesses can't be liberated from the cycle of reincarnation. Only human beings can. So if you start over as a bug, then you have a long way to go. Well, hopefully, eventually, you'll get to the state of a human being.
Because we originally discussed, well, who cares what you do? Because you're just going to be reincarnated. Like, you can be a jerk this life and then make up for it next life. But I guess if you go down each time, you really shouldn't be good. You'll be like a dung beetle.
Yeah.
Really crappy.
Now, karma also, in terms of social justice, explains things like evil in the world. So why is this? You've had a really crappy life, right? You've been abused all your life. So why is that? You were a bastard in your last life, right? And you're getting what you deserve, to some extent. If you had a really good life, right, good family, well, that's because of your good karma. I mean, it gets more complicated, but that's one way to explain it. Yeah.
I was going to say, couldn't you almost think about like being reincarnated as a bug as a form of purgatory, as waiting out your time because you're an asshole in your previous life, so now you're a bug, so now you got to wait until you can get another chance at being.
I think it's a nice way, especially for someone coming from that tradition.
Yeah.
That might be some people, purgatory doesn't mean anything, but for some people, absolutely. And I think you want to think of reincarnation as kind of like a punishment. So as a purgatory, maybe even a hell. I mean, that's. It's not fun, yeah.
I just had a quick question because before you mentioned that in Hinduism there is an idea of reincarnation, obviously, but there's also heaven and hell. Like, how's that possible? Is there heaven and hell there?
Absolutely, but it's not stressed. Not to the extent that Christians, Jews, and Muslims stress it.
So is heaven and hell part of the reincarnation itself? So like you're living, but you're like kind of living in hell? Or is heaven?
You can be reincarnated as something that's in hell, or as something.
Or
that's
as
in
something
heaven.
that's on earth?
Yes.
Okay. I guess
But reincarnation in samsara kind of fuels everything. That's the key point in this tradition.
I thought that was the main point, that there is no hell or heaven in
There is no eternal
Okay.
heaven or hell, but there is certainly a heaven and hell. And we'll even see this especially when we get to more elaborate forms of Buddhism, like Tibetan Buddhism.
So it's kind of like a holding spot before you reincarnate again?
It could be, yeah, absolutely, yes. I don't want to jump ahead, but when we get to like Pure Land Buddhism kind of delves into that question specifically. What exactly do you do in heaven? The other term we looked at was moksha. Moksha means liberation, right? And so the goal of all this is liberation. And it's just this state where you're just, it's ineffable, right? So when we talk about, interesting enough, when you look at any of the religious traditions, there are mystics, right? I mean, on Friday, I'm meeting with a Buddhist, really cool, a Buddhist master. That's his title. He's a Buddhist master. He's the abbot at a Buddhist monastery. And I'll say one thing, and I've had a lot of experience with monks and nuns, people that spend their lives in prayer and meditating. They just have this aura about them. There's something. If you don't believe me, go check it out. There's a Catholic monastery, in the Abbey of Geneseo. Geneseo. There's one right here in Buddhist in Niagara Falls. There's something about these people, right, where they're just like so happy and so, not like crazy happy, but they're just so unattached to things. And then this is within this tradition as well. So, how do we get there? How do you get to moksha? How does the average Hindu get to moksha? And in order to get to this state of liberation, it's not something you can just pick up and do for most. You have to have some sort of training to get there. This is where it gets to the dharmas. You have to break your attachments of evil, and you have to learn how to act in a certain way. In a sense, you have to be ethical before you can enter into monasticism. So there's a training, a moral training that you need to do. And so Hinduism, at least traditionally and ideally, has duties that you will have in each state of your lives. And this brings us to the three main duties that you have, or that a Hindu has. And by duties, we mean right activities. And so in each state, so the ideal is you start off like in the student phase, and the ideal is to be the best student you can be the best you can be at your different experiences, your different contexts. But eventually, you want to get to a point where you can focus solely on preparing for the afterlife, and that's going to be extremely important when we look at the funerary customs and how you can help a Hindu cope with death. Did you put those hands up? Just to go over again, when we talk about where we get these duties from, what is the content from which we get these duties from? The first are the Vedas. We talked about the Rig Vedas, with the fire sacrifice. The Upanishads are part of the Vedas, very, very important. The second, which are most popular today, are the Smritis. And the most important Smriti today, the most popular text today in Hinduism is the Gita. Right? You can actually YouTube the Gita. And there's many, many movies. You're all familiar with like the Indian Bollywood. Yeah, there are many these beautiful scenes of dancing of Krishna and Arjuna. If you get a chance, check it out. But one of the most read texts, period, today, and certainly within Hinduism. Conduct of exemplary individuals. Think of like Gandhi for many Hindus, as well as your conscience. But we're looking at these two specifically. Asrama Dharma, really quick, and just pay attention to these four. You don't have to pay attention to this. So, how you live your life, there's certain things that you should strive as you're living your life in preparation for moksha, for liberation, or this intense ascetical, this intense monastic, this intense hermetical practice. And the first is to cultivate an idea of success, right? It's okay to pursue wealth at certain points in your life, to take care of your family, to have a family. Passion. I mean, I mentioned to some of you the Kama Sutra. What is the Kama Sutra? I see you smiling. What is the Kama Sutra? Tell us.
Well, it talks about passion, but it's sex positions.
Yes, it's sex positions, right? And so here we have a tradition where it's very, very, like, our goal is, in a sense, in parts of this tradition, is to become a monk, celibate. But then we have this book on how to maximize your orgasms.
Are these parts of the duties that Hindus have? So, because that's what you prefaced it as, you said, three main duties Hindus have.
Yes. So this is the Asrama Dharma. So passion, being passionate. You could even go as far as having good sex. Of course, the context is marriage. No, seriously, that's a big no-no, having sex outside of marriage. Virtue, pursuing virtue is living a good life, and then finally, we get to self-perfection. Another way to look at it is this: there are 4 states in life. The first state is the student, and with the student, you have particular asrama dharmas, right? So this is where you be cultivating. This is where you be cultivating these particular virtues, not sexual desire. You move from a student, and the next step would be householder. So you have a family, enter into marriage, but you're starting to control your desires a little more. This is where you'd be using the Kama Sutra. But then, you kids are in college or whatever. You're settled. You're deciding not to have children anymore. Think of Gandhi. Gandhi's a great example. All of you familiar with Gandhi? When he's 30 years old, I believe, he decides no more sex. Right? I'm 32. I just can't imagine that. I've been saying to my wife, we're not going to have sex for the rest of our lives. But he did, right? Then that's like part of this tradition. And so he enters into, he doesn't do this ideally, but ideally in some cases, at least traditionally, they would leave the house and go into the forest and dwell as a monk in a sense, or a hermit. And of course, they're still connected to the family, but they're leaving aside those family concerns to focus on their spirituality. And then, for those few, they move on to becoming a hermit, where they completely cut off connections with their family. In certain parts of India, they actually, in order to become a hermit, you have to fill out a death certificate. So you're legally dead. So you take care of all your legalities, in terms of all your finances. You are now dead to your family, dead to the world, and you are now focusing on, this ascetical practices.
We were talking about that in our group, and so you're now dead. Does this mean you're like not in the house? Like you're gone, far away?
You could be a beggar in the streets of New Delhi, wherever. You could be in the forest. You could be wandering the countryside. You are now a holy man or a holy woman.
Because we were thinking like how silly that would be. Dad sitting in the corner, everyone gets together for dinner. And it's
No. You're totally disconnected. Because now it's you've taken on this function of a holy man. You might say that for a devout Hindu. I mean, there's a lot of these monks. How they support themselves? They might go to the city and pray. They might pray on one leg for hours on end. And how are they? But they still have to eat. Still need water. People will give them money. They'll give them alms. In order to support them. It's considered a great gift to support someone who is pursuing this life. Okay? We'll stop right there and we'll pick up on Varna Dharmas on Tuesday.
Thursday. Yes,
Thursday. Sorry, Thursday.